So here we are. We're on May 10th, and we're going to be talking a lot about open-ended questions. Our agenda for the day is that I want to do a brief review of motivational interviewing that we talked about last time. We're going to describe a typical encounter not using MI and then using MI, and Nicole's going to help me role play that. We'll go over that in a minute. I want to provide an overview of the framework on using MI in a healthcare encounter, and then we're going to describe some open-ended questions. But before I start, I did give you guys a little bit of homework last time to look at some resources and maybe try doing some really good listening and not offering advice. Does anybody want to chat in any thoughts that they had, anything that they might have found that they thought was really useful? So as I talk a little bit, why don't you start chatting in things? You don't have to, but if you want to, do that, and Nicole's going to keep track of them. And as you're chatting them in, I'll probably come back to them a little later on. So again, this is the MI flip chart that Let's Go developed about 15 months ago. We're going to be doing an update to this later this summer, but if anybody wants to go online, you can see it here, and Donna did send out a link to it initially. So again, just a little bit of an overview, a little repetition, but I think it's always good to hear things a couple times. So remember, we talked a lot about this last week, that MI is a patient-centered guiding style for enhancing motivation to change by exploring and resolving ambivalence. The key words are there in bold. We also talked about how this is a shift in how we communicate with patients, and I know when I started this, it was a really big shift for me. You know, it's guiding versus directing, less focused on fixing and persuading, and more focused on seeking and understanding and collaboration. And that's really hard for us because, you know, these patients come in and we feel there's a lot of fixing that we need to do. But if we focus less on that and just more on understanding on where they are and more on collaboration, that's the real MI way. The other is that we see the patient as the expert on themselves. We accept the patient's ambivalence and fluctuations as normal. Remember, we talked about it. If you think about any behavior change you've ever made, you're kind of ambivalent about it. Yeah, you know, I think I want to get up in the morning and go for a run, but yeah, my bed's kind of nice, and I really like the coffee in the morning, and yeah, but the running would make me feel better. That is really normal for all of us. The last couple are really important. Seeing any progress as progress, and that relapse is not a failure but a learning opportunity. And I talked a lot about how to set those expectations up clearly with your patients and families so that they know they can come back to you, even if they've only made a little progress, or even if they haven't made any progress and maybe they've gone backwards, because that's an opportunity to talk about what's happening in their world. So we also talked about what motivational interviewing isn't. So it's not arguing that a person has a problem and needs to change. It's not offering advice without patient's permission. Not doing most of the talking. Remember, you want to be hearing the patient talk more than 50% of the time. And I remember telling you last time that I like to talk, so this was really hard for me working with my patients and families. And it's not giving a prescription. We spent a lot of time on this slide, and it's a slide that my friend John Famberg often says to me, Tori, I don't know really what you mean by this, you know, comfort the afflicted and afflict the comfortable. And so I wanted to go over it again because I think it's important that in the beginning of motivational interviewing, the beginning of talking with your patients and families, you want to comfort them. You want to express empathy and really listen to them, because then that's where you're starting to have that collaboration. You then want to afflict the comfortable, which means that once you have set up this nice partnership with your patient, you want to then show them the discrepancy between what the patient's ultimate goals are and what they are doing. So Tori, you really say that you really like to get a lot of exercise, and morning time's a really great time for you to go running, but yet you're having a hard time getting up in the morning and doing that. Right then, it showed there's two sides of me, that I know I really want to get up and run in the morning, and I know it's really good for me, and I'm still hanging out in bed and still having that second cup of coffee before doing anything. That area of afflicting the comfortable, that area of showing the discrepancy, that's where the patients will start to feel that they can understand their values. You'll start to show them their strengths, and they'll start to come up with their own solutions. We also talked about this idea of rolling with resistance, right? That's where the dancing comes in. And so instead of, and you'll see this a little bit when Nicole's going to start, we do a role play, and she'll start to give me a lot of resistance. And instead of me continuing to fight back at her when I'm using MI, I'm just going to roll with it a little bit. We'll do a lot more of this next week on the reflective listening. And then in the end, we find meaning for the change. And that's where you start to bring the patient's values and goals. I will tell you, MI works really well when you know the patient a bit. So us in primary care, it's great because we usually have seen the patient over years. And Tim Goltz, who does a great job with this up in Lincoln County Healthcare, he talks a lot about how he gets to know his patients early on, and early on just asks them their values. So when he gets to a place where Tim's going to be doing MI with his patients, he already has some background in them, things that he knows that are important to them, and that's really important. So that's a little bit of the background, and that's what we did last week. I hope some of that sounds familiar to you. So some of you may be wondering how you bring this all together, and how long does it take? Well, here's a framework that may help with this. So there's 3 areas. This is page 15 in the flip chart, and there's 3 areas that we talk about. You first start off by exploring and understanding what's going on. That's when you use open-ended questions and reflective listening. You can also ask permission, which I think is really important, and you may say something like this. Hey, Mrs. O'Brien, if it's okay with you, we'd like to talk about Bryson's weight today and healthy habits. And if she says yes, then you can go on and comfort the afflicted. Great, tell me what a typical day is for Bryson. And then you drain the swamp of negativity. You let Mrs. O'Brien talk about all the things that are hard. You roll with that resistance. You start dancing and not wrestling with her. And then you start to end that section by building rapport and expressing empathy. You might say something like, it sounds like you and your sons have very busy days, and it sounds like you're really interested in your son's health. And then you can explore the pros and cons. That beginning piece can take a couple minutes, or if you have a lot of time, it can take 10 minutes. The next section is really about guiding the patient and exploring the patient's values and strengths. And when I started to do this work, I was like, wow, this sounds like a lot like social work. And no offense to any of the social workers around the call. You guys are awesome. You guys are trained in this. And as a physician, I was like, wow, I'm not sure if I've got the time and I have the knowledge base and the energy to get into somebody's values and strengths. But you know what I found out? It was fascinating. It was really fascinating to see what people valued. Also, they all had strengths that they may not have been aware of. An example is people who struggle with weight, they often have been up and down in their weight. So they often have times when they have reduced their weight and have been healthy. And so that's a strength. You'd want to focus in on that. What happened during that time? So that middle section of this encounter is around importance and confidence, values, and strengths. And then lastly, you help the patient set goals, but only if you hear this thing called change talk. And we're going to talk about that in a couple weeks. Basically, change talk is when somebody says something like, I really should be getting up in the morning and run. And, I think I might be able to do that on Tuesdays when my husband doesn't get up as early as I do. Right then, you're starting to hear me say, I think I really should be doing this. And you all also started to hear me say, maybe I can even sense and hear a way that I can do that. Remember, small goals. It's really hard if a patient comes to you and says, I think I'm going to start running in the morning because I'm going to run a half marathon next week. So not a great goal, right? Not realistic. Remember, any change is positive. You can build a menu of options that they choose from and then follow up. So we're going to talk a lot about all of this, this framework right here over the next couple weeks. But today what we're going to talk a little about, we're going to do a role play right now, and then we're going to go into some open-ended questions. So Nicole is here, Mrs. O'Brien.
Yes.
And she has a son, Bryson, who is 11 years old, and they're in the office for a physical. So I'm going to talk mostly with Mrs. O'Brien, but just so you know, and many on the call know, that it's always hard when you have somebody around 10-ish because you could really be speaking to them. For this example, we're just going to, I'll speak with Mrs. O'Brien about it. But definitely for kids over 13, you really should be thinking about talking to them about this. So we're going to do actually 3 role plays. The first 2 are going to be, it's 3 different times. I'll go through it. The first one is definitely non-MI, and then we're going to use MI, and I hope to show you some open-ended questions and some reflections, and I hope you hear Mrs. O'Brien talking more than I. We're not going to go through very long with this because I think it's hard to do it without you guys seeing us, but we'll try it, and I'm sure some of you will let us know if it worked or not. So we're going to start off. Well, hi, Mrs. O'Brien. It's nice that you and Bryson came in for his physical today, and I needed to talk to you about his weight. Is that okay if we talk about his weight?
I'm not really comfortable talking about that.
Well,
today.
we need to talk about it today. His weight is really going up, he's really going to have to stop watching, doing the gaming stuff, and he's really got to get more physical activity.
Yeah, well, I was really more concerned, with how he's been feeling, so more than his weight today.
Yeah, well, yeah, I'm concerned about that too, but his weight really is an issue. So I think what I'd like you to do is let's think about how much he's gaming. Let's get those fruits and veggies into him. He'll probably need some more sleep. And then why don't I see you in 3 months?
Yeah, well, he really doesn't like veggies. It's really a struggle at home.
Well, he's going to have to eat those.
Yeah. Okay. Well, I do try. I really try.
I bet you try, and you're going to have to try harder.
Yeah.
So you can see the non-MI way. Of course, I'm being a little over the top, but you can see how I asked permission. Nicole said no. Mrs. O'Brien said no. I kept on going. So again, I kind of went to a degree just to show you the non-MI way. So now we're going to do motivational interviewing, one where I'm asking permission and Nicole says no, and so that's the second role play. So again, Ms. O'Brien, you're in here for Bryson's 11-year physical. That's awesome. I was wondering if it's okay if we talked about weight and healthy habits today.
No, not really today. I don't really have the time for it today.
Okay, that's okay. I understand that you're really busy, but I just wanted you to know that I'm a little concerned about his weight, and I'm concerned that it may be affecting his health. So when you're ready, I'll be ready to talk about that. But what would you like to talk about today?
Well, I actually have been a little concerned lately with his video game time, his TV time.
Great.
It's kind of been a struggle.
Great. I'm going to pause there for a second, and we're going to come back and do a third one. So you see what people often say, Tori, when you ask permission, what do you do if they say no? Well, this is what you do. You acknowledge that there's a concern as a physician. There's a concern that I have, and I wanted Mrs. O'Brien to know that concern. But I also, just to barrel through and continue to talk about weight wasn't going to work for Mrs. O'Brien. So what I did there was just basically let her know that I was concerned and that we could come back to it at another time. So now we're going to do the third one, and I think she's going to give me permission to talk a little bit about weight,
yes.
and then we're going to go a little longer with that. I'm just going to get a sip of water here. Okay, take 3. Okay. Mrs. O'Brien, thank you for bringing Bryson in for his physical today. I was wondering if it's okay if we talk a little bit about weight and the healthy habits. I see that you filled out that questionnaire.
Yeah, sure, absolutely.
Great, great. Well, his weight looks good. It's like he seems to be gaining weight a little faster than he's growing tall, but he's still 11 years old, so I'm sure that he'll continue to grow tall. It looks like both you and your husband are on the taller side. So let's focus on the healthy habits. So you filled out this questionnaire.
Yeah.
Is there one thing on here that you'd like to talk about?
I'm a little concerned with the TV time and,
Okay.
the video games.
Can you tell me a little bit about what a typical day for Bryson is around that?
Yeah, so during the week, right, he's very busy. He's very active in school and after school activities, but he always does want some time after school. On the weekends, of course, he could wake up and video game all day, not brush his teeth, not get dressed. I think it's very typical for his age, but it's a struggle. I'm not sure how to work with it and how to discuss it without it being an argument or that I'm trying to push these things on him.
What would it be like if he didn't watch as much gaming? Do you have a sense of that? Or not watch gaming, do as much gaming?
I'm bored.
So it sounds to me like he's got a very busy life and that gaming's very fun for him.
Yes.
It also sounds like you're concerned a little bit about his health and what the gaming has to do with his health.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely.
So tell me a little bit about what you think about health and what do you think about for Bryson's health.
Yeah, I just worry, I want him to make good decisions for himself, right? I really want him to make the decisions, to learn how to make decisions and not me making them for him. So
Mhm.
that's where my concern comes in. I would like him to wake up and say, oh, I'm going to go outside and play today instead of playing video games because it's really nice outside. Or
Yeah, so it sounds like you're pretty frustrated that sometimes he doesn't take your suggestions.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. It sounds like you also have a very busy life too. You're in school, I know.
Yes, I'm very busy.
And you shared with me in the past that sometimes when he's gaming, it works for you because you don't have to worry about.
I mean, I don't have to hear, Mom, I'm bored. Mom, I'm bored, right?
You can focus on your thing.
Exactly.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Great. So I'm going to pause here, and because then we could go on for another 10 or 15 minutes. And what I hope I showed you there is that I hope you heard Nicole speaking more than I did. In the beginning, again, we're going to talk about open-ended questions. You use them in the beginning of the conversation. So we'll move on a little bit. So here we are. These are the three skills that we're going to be talking about over the course of the next couple weeks. And we're going to talk mostly about open-ended questions today. I want to say something about listening skills. I was talking to somebody the other day about this webinar series, and they said, well, Tori, these basic listening skills that we all learn in med school, and some of you maybe learned in nursing school or in grad school. And they were basic things that we did learn about communication skills in med school, and I think I forgot a lot of them, and now I'm getting them back. But they're basic things like eye contact. When I was talking to Nicole, I was looking at her. There are non-verbal cues that we can all have, and so you have to be careful of that. There's the body position, right? Do my hands crossed like I really don't care, or are my hands and my body open to be receptive to this? And then full attention. The patients really pick up on it. I just want to bring it to your attention that these are great communication skills, and when we're using MI, we should make sure that we use them. So in the next 10 minutes, we'll talk about open-ended questions. So the great thing about open-ended questions is that they get the ball rolling. They can't be answered with a yes or no. They use the patient's own words, and they're not biased or judgmental. They're only really used to initiate the conversation because, you can't have a whole conversation about open-ended questions. I did a couple with Nicole, and then I switched over to some reflections, because if you kept asking open-ended questions, they would be there forever. And again, you rely more on this concept of reflective listening than on the questions as you move through this. So here are some closed-ended questions. Let's compare them. So closed-ended, did you have a great vacation? That's a yes or a no. Are you depressed? Yes or no. And that can be, that can be hard to ask. You ask somebody, are you depressed? They may not want to say yes or no. Is your job going okay? Yes or no. Don't you know you'll get diabetes if you don't quit drinking soda? Now, that's kind of harsh, but people do say it like that. So now let's go to open-ended questions. Can you tell me about your vacation? Help me understand how your moods are today. What's going on in your job? What connection, if any, do you think diabetes and soda has? I might say it a little differently. What connection, if any, do you think soda has to your diabetes? Those open-ended questions, they don't open up everything. So you don't have to worry that all of a sudden you've opened up the floodgates on things, but you've let the patients have an opportunity to say either not yes or no, but to say something maybe in between this. So we're going to go through these, and as I take you through the next number of slides, they're closed-ended questions, and I want you to make them open-ended. I'm going to read them aloud, and then you should be thinking how you would change them to an open-ended question. If you go to the flip chart, there's on one of the pages on the flip chart, and I'll pull that out right now. It's on page 6. There's a number of starters about open-ended questions. Tell me about, how's it going, how are things been, when, if ever, do you take your medicines, those kinds of open-ended questions. So I'll read them aloud. You guys think about them. If we were in person, I would call people out that I know that are here. Like I might call out Danny. I believe Danny's on the call. I might call out Bailey or Allison, or I might call out, let's see who else is on here, Kelly or Catherine or Carol, but you guys I won't. So that's the good news. But I want you to do it on your end, and then I will tell you how I would have made these closed-ended questions back to an open-ended question. So the first one, do you have any questions about your new medicine? So think about that. Let's see. Wait a minute, let me go back. So do you have any questions about your new medicine? How I would change that to an open-ended question, I'd say, what questions, if any, do you have about your new medicine? This makes folks feel that it's okay to have questions. How about the next one? Are you taking your insulin every day? You think that's a pretty benign question, but if you're not taking your insulin every day, it can feel a little judgmental. So you might say something like, how's it going with taking your insulin on a daily basis? It opens up the conversation, allows the patient to talk about the difficulties they maybe had taking their insulin. Here's another one. You're not experiencing any side effects from your new medication, are you? Right then, I basically said, I don't think you should be having any side effects, and I hope you're not because I'm not ready to talk about them. But if you change that question around to an open-ended question, it would be, what, if any, side effects are you having from the new medication? So what, if any? I like that, if any. It basically means maybe you're not having any, right? This normalizes the behavior. Does your child like the teachers and kids at his new school? Again, a better way to do that is, tell me how your child feels about his new school. That just opens it up to get a lot more information. Again, you want the open-ended questions in the beginning of the encounter with the patient so you can start to understand what's going on with that patient. So we'll do a couple more of these. Do you have any major fears about your upcoming operation? Well, most people do, right? So most people do have major fears about it. So you might say something different. What fears, if any, do you have about your upcoming operation? Another closed-ended, do you get along well with your boyfriend? That's a yes or no. But it's better to ask, I think, say, tell me about your boyfriend, because from that, you're going to get a lot more information. So I think you guys are getting the hang of this. I hope you're trying some of it there. Carol Call, are you trying any of these? Here's another one. Did everything go okay this week? That's closed-ended, again, because you answer that yes or no. So if I ask that to Nicole, did everything go this week? And she says no, I might do a follow-up. If she says yes, I'm not really sure what that means. Versus, how did things go this week? Then she can say, things went okay. Some days were good, some days were bad. Another one, did this make you upset? That's a yes or no. I love the start of an open-ended question. Help me understand. Right then you're saying, I don't understand you, but I want to understand. So help me understand how that made you feel. Another one, are you exercising every day? So when my doc asks me that, I feel terrible because I am not. So an open-ended question to that would be, how often, if at all, do you exercise during the week? We have one more of these. Again, when I started to do these open-ended questions, I definitely needed a few starters that made sense for me. The examples on page 6 are just some that have worked for me and others, but you might want to think about a couple that you want to, when you want to ask about medications, or you want to ask about exercise, or you want to ask about how somebody's day is going. Think of the ones that make sense to you. So we'll do a couple more of these. Do you feel your weight is a problem? So that's an interesting one because that's a yes or a no, but the better question is, how do you feel about your weight? That's because do you feel your weight is a problem? It's not a problem, but I don't feel great about it, right? So how do you feel about your weight is going to open it up. Will not buying sodas increase stress in your house? That's a yes or a no, but what would it be like if there wasn't any soda in your house? And I did ask that to Nicole, and I said, what would it be like if there wasn't as much gaming going on? So asking, what would it be like if blah, blah, blah is a great way to sort of let the patient talk about potentially a stressful situation. What would it be like if you didn't take Molly to McDonald's every time she asked about it? This is another closed-ended question. Can you start to make these changes next week? Well, if I'm thinking I'm making a change, I'm going to get up in the morning and I'm going to start running, and then my doc says, well, can you do these next week? That might be a little too soon for me. So another way to ask this in more an open-ended question way could be, when would be a good time for you to start making some of these changes? Again, you're putting it back on the patient to come up with their goal, their timing of it. They're experts. They know they're experts on themselves. They know when's best to start this. Just two more. Do you think your son watches too much TV? That's a yes or a no, right? How about, How do you feel about your son's TV and computer habits? Again, that opens up the conversation. And lastly, will Sarah be angry if you say no to eating at a fast food restaurant? So the open-ended question to that would be, what do you think Sarah's reaction will be if you say no to eating at the fast food restaurant? Again, these open-ended questions help you get more information for the conversation. And again, you only do 2 or 3. You're not going to be doing all of these, obviously. So there's something called probes. And so these can follow open-ended questions. And what they do is if you want to know a little more about it. So these are some examples. Tell me more about that. When I started to do MI and I would find that I would get stuck and I'd be like, oh gosh, I can't remember what to do next, I would always have a couple of these in my back pocket. So the ones that I used are right here. I'd always say, tell me more about that, because that gave me some time to do some thinking. It gave the patient more time to be talking, and I knew they needed to be talking more than I. How did that make you feel? You know, MI is all about how the patient feels, so asking somebody, how did that make you feel, is great. What was that like for you? So if somebody's had an experience where they were really successful, maybe in weight loss or successful in starting an exercise program, and what was that like for you when that happened? Or on the reverse, when somebody had a relapse, again, what was that like for you? A couple other ones, what were the reasons for your decision? What are your concerns about this? Again, these are what they call them probes, because you go just a little deeper. This is another technique which I really like too, and it's used when you're trying to figure out where the patient is on a continuum. And it takes away any judging of the behavior. It sort of normalizes things. You go to an extreme and then you find out where the patient is in the middle. So here's an example. So some people don't like veggies at all and they never eat them, and others really love them and eat them all day. Where are you? So what you basically said to the patient is, you're probably not in those extremes, and it's okay. Either one is totally fine. When you say this, some are like this and others are like this, you got to make sure that you're not being judgmental on any side of this. Another example would be, some parents don't let their kids watch any TV during the school week, and other parents don't have any set rules. Where are you on this? And lastly, you could say, some kids exercise every day and some kids don't exercise at all. Where are you? Again, so these are just another way for you to be understanding in the beginning part of your dialogue with the patient and family, understanding a little bit about what's going on in their world. So again, this is the framework that we're using today. What we did is we talked about exploring and understanding and using those open-ended questions. And we're going to be talking more next week about reflective listening. So today was just an idea or just an opportunity to talk to you about how do you open up the conversation. We'll be going through each of these over the next couple weeks. And in closing, I wanted to bring up a virtual online training called Change Talk. It's a free app through the App Store. It's 20 to 30 minutes to complete the module. It's an avatar, so you ask you're the doctor, and you're asking some questions to the patient, and you get to see what the mom feels about it. You see that thing over her head. That's a little scale of how she feels. So you get to see what the kid feels and the mom feels. You can earn CME credit. I'm not sure you can earn the CME credit through the App Store, but I'll find out about that. I'd love your guys' opinion if this was helpful or not. This is something that was developed at the American Academy of Pediatrics by some of my colleagues, and lots of people really like it. So you could try that out. And lastly, so a homework assignment if you want. And Nicole, can you check and see if anybody chatted in? Not yet. Okay. So you can check out the Change Talk for your homework assignment, and you could try to change a question or two from closed-ended into an open-ended question and see what happens. So be thinking in your encounters how you might ask somebody, did you have a nice day? That's a yes or no. You might say, tell me about your day. Are you taking all your medications? That's a yes or no. Say, tell me about how it is taking your medications. So try changing from closed to an open-ended, and we'll see how that goes. I've got a few, it looks like it's 12:45, but I'm happy if anybody has any questions or thoughts to chat them in through the question box, and we'll be here. I also want to be mindful that if people need to sign off, that's okay too. We'll stay on for a couple more minutes, and then we'll see you next week, same time, same place. And thanks a lot for listening.